Has your health been covered up? Today, it's Revealing Wholeness with Dr. Troy Munson, presented to you by Infinity Whole Health.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Troy Munson on Revealing Wholeness. Today is an unusual day. We cross a threshold. Those of you who have been through the first 5 lessons and have been practicing them and beginning the process of understanding that what you see might not necessarily be all that it's cracked up to be. I wanted to start this particular exercise today with more of a story. I just got done reading Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it's a long book. I highly recommend that you really have it read to you. I like audiobooks. I like how this particular author or the person that she had read it. She did a great job. I was really blown away. She did a great job following characters. There's a lot of development of characters. There's a lot of switching around, some wild things. But what I loved most is, if you've not read the story or know nothing about Uncle Tom's Cabin, she really was at church and got a download from God about this book. And she went home and started writing frantically. I mean, just at a breakneck speed, wrote the entire book in one sitting. And she said people just kept feeding her sheets of paper until they ran out of sheets of paper at her house. And then she was writing on anything she could find. And when you read it, she tells a perspective from people and you're like, wow, this is almost like 4 or 5 people that really had to be involved to write this, yet only one person did. And the input that she has from each of the characters I find quite profound. But in the end, she talks about the slave, because Uncle Tom's Cabin talks about slavery. This is back in the early 1800s or middle 1800s that she wrote it. And it was really a huge proponent of why slavery ended in the first place. But when she went at the very end of the book to talk about slavery and master relationship, that it doesn't matter how good a person is, when somebody is in charge of another person, it's tyrannical, almost always. And it is much like what we've been going through with our lessons about how the mind, we at our core were this amazing, infinite, glorious being, and we put our brain, this small little device that was meant to kind of maneuver through a world, don't touch that snake that's rattling, don't touch that glowing amber, hey, stay away from that ledge, hey, that berry looks okay, that berry does not look okay. It was designed to kind of keep us, quote unquote, out of harm's way, but now it just has a voracious appetite and rules us. It's really the master, and yet it's nothing. And so today marks really great joy in our stepping stones of undoing the mind. And this is the day that really some reversal of the thinking of the world begins to take place, because this is the first idea that we are going to relate to a major phase of the correction process of that thinking process. And so I'm going to spill it right now. The first part of this is my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. And so meaningless thoughts are, when we start really understanding that our thoughts are the ones that determine the world. Not the world determines my thoughts, but my thoughts determine the world I see. If I think things are rosy peachy and you don't, what's real? What's reality here? Well, we know it's real for you and we know it's real for me. So as we begin that process, we have to realize that it is indeed my thoughts that order the world I see. And so now I can put great gladness on practicing this particular part of the lesson really and hone this. Do this 3 or 4 times today. Begin maybe with your eyes closed and repeat the idea to yourself. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. Okay, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. Then open your eyes and begin to glance around at anything nonchalantly. Don't let your eyes linger on anything too long. Maybe do this for a minute and be done. Revisit it in 6-7 hours and then maybe before bed. 3 times might be great. And so we're just going to start with that. Then we're going to move into I am upset because I see a meaningless world. Now, here's the problem: as we really start digging in to realizing that my thoughts are meaningless, it tends to make us frightened, because now, what upsets me in the world, it can be frightening. Maybe I see a violent world. Maybe I see a sad world. Maybe I see an insane world. Well, these are attributes that we have given the world, not the world is giving us. We have literally labeled them. They're technically meaningless unless we give them meaning, all the things that happen. So this particular part of the lesson today, we're going to do 3 today. So it's also an unusual day in that realm. We've done 2 each of the last 5 days. But on this one, we're going to add a 3rd one today because I think it's very apt to this. So I want you to start with eyes open and look around and say, you can repeat the thought for the day, which is, I'm upset because I see a meaningless world. But as you look around, I want you to really give it some meat. You can say that, I think I see a fearful world. I think I see a chaotic world. I think I see an unfair world. I think I see a sad world. I think I see an unjust world. You can stick anything in there you want. And you might start with some negatives. Some of you out there may have already jumped ahead of me and said, well, what about the positive stuff? I see a beautiful world. I see an exquisite world. I see a loving world. I see a giving world. Those are all okay too, and I highly recommend that you put those in there too. Let's not be one-sided here. But in the end, I want you to end on, but I am upset because I see a meaningless world. So feel free to go through the negatives and the positives, 2-3 times. If you want to push into maybe 5 times, that's fine. As many times you need to. If you get upset, might be a perfect opportunity just to even do 10-15 seconds on, I see an angry world, but I'm only seeing a meaningless world. Make it right for you. These aren't hard and fast and in concrete, but as you start listening to that inner voice, you're going to start being directed in a way that is more and more meaningful to you and helps undo your mind, which is different than my mind. And so allow that flexibility for some of you that might consider yourself maybe rigid. It's okay. And some of you that are way out there, that are very creative, man, go for it. It's okay. Last part of lesson. A meaningless world engenders fear. So recognizing meaninglessness, it can really make us very anxious, very nervous, very uneasy and uncertain. It can really throw a hinge in our mind. And so be careful there. Your mind will want to go back into ordering things. And while that's okay, just watch what it does. It isn't necessary to do anything more than that. If you find that you're getting quite frantic, and you're getting fearful, it may be helpful to take a break for a day and then practice it again the next day. And so as we realize that, hey, it's just a process of undoing. So there may be some fear that arises, and know that that is just fear inside of us, and we can gently lay that aside. So if this particular lesson begins to bring up some fear in you, it might be a great time to practice letting go of fear. You say it, and let's say it brings up some fear, and you're like, let me just watch this fear. Let me watch where it rests, maybe in the chest, maybe in the abdomen. We've talked about kind of opening up a window and allowing that fear to rush out, or that energy just to rush out of your body, and not judge it, not try to label it. If fear becomes intense, I don't want you to say, wow, I'm really fearful. I'd rather you use something like, hey, there seems to be a lot of fear driven by this thought that's running through the mind. That's okay too, not claiming the fear, but just noticing that it is there. All those things are acceptable in this process as we begin to undo these things. So, I am looking at a meaningless world can be one of the things you could say with this. A meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. So here's another thought. So when we begin to start labeling things, we are actually taking the place of our higher self, or that is one with God. And so if we start taking the place of God, we start seating ourselves in a place where we really necessarily don't have the tools as of yet, even though He gave them all to us. But when we're viewing things through a worldly nature, we're now creating a lot of fear, because ultimately now I'm responsible for everything, and we can't even hardly get through our day. And so at this point, really be careful, because these are where these thoughts are going to start driving as we start undoing the mind and start getting into the really the spiritual mind, which is our higher mind, which is our real thoughts, our loving thoughts, our peaceful thoughts, our true thoughts. Not the things that we've labeled and judged around us all the time and hold people in these patterns that really we're just keeping a brother down, rather than elevating those around us as we begin to move through these patterns and elevate ourselves as well. And in this, we begin to start healing. And so we are going through this for the sole goal of healing, and not only healing the body, but really first and foremost healing the mind. So we're going to get there. So today we've got some work to do over the next week until we hit this again next week. But I'm excited to see where it's going. So until then, if you have any questions or comments, please email me. I'll do the best to answer your questions as they come in. And we're starting to get lots of emails, so it's kind of fun to chat with all of you. And until next time, I am Dr. Troy Munson on Revealing Wholeness.
This concludes another episode of Revealing Wholeness with Dr. Troy Munson. If you have any questions concerning this podcast or others, you can reach Dr. Munson by email at chiroman, that's CHIRO man, at dr.com. Or you can call him at his office during office operation hours at 360-893-8586. This show is sponsored by Infinity Whole Health on the Disruptors Podcast Network.
The information on this podcast from Dr. Troy Munson is meant to educate the listener on a variety of health issues. It is not meant to diagnose or treat any conditions.